Hello, everyone. Salem United Church of, what is it, Christ? I want to make sure I got that right. Church of Christ. Good to see you. I'm Jay Bakker. I run Revolution Gathering. I've been doing Revolution for a long time. I'm in Washington, near Seattle. I'm in a place called Linwood. And right now I'm running pretty much an online YouTube podcast church because I've moved around a lot. But I am grateful to be here for the installation for senior pastor, which is fantastic because you guys got an amazing one, as you probably already know, of Lawrence Richardson. When Lawrence asked me to speak at this event, I was just like, yes, no questions. Like I was blown away. I was blown away by it, and I was like, of course, this is right, because as you all probably know, is that Lawrence is not just a pastor because of his education and because of his studies and because of his background. I mean, that makes him an excellent pastor and communicator. But he has I've grown up in the church most of my life. I grew up I was born into the ministry. My parents were the biggest televangelists in the country, in the world. When I was 18, I started a church. I'm 46. Give you an idea where I'm at with that. And so I've seen a lot of folks, seen a lot of pastors go through this. And there are a few, and this isn't a critique of other pastors, but there are a few pastors who you just know carry the essence of ministry within them. That it's down to their marrow, like in their bones. And Lawrence is one of those people. And from the day I met Lawrence, it was like when we met each other, it was like a confirmation walking into the room. There was no other shoe to drop. There was no positioning with each other. It was, this is a person who loves other people. Automatically, my first impression was, when you hear how beautiful are the feet that bring the good news. Now, Lawrence has spoken for me at Revolution. I've interviewed Lawrence for podcasts before. But Lawrence has also ministered to me as well, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But, there were times that we just sat down as two people in ministry just discussing what was going on. And what I loved about that, if you hear screaming in the background, it's my kids in the room. They're supposed to be sleeping, but I don't think they are. It wasn't... And I put this because I think all these things are going to be very important in our work. But for when we sat down, it wasn't white heterosexual male punk rock pastor, son of Jim and Tammy, or African American pastor, transgender. It wasn't any of that. There was no othering felt in that moment. What I felt in that moment was almost like that Galatians verse where Paul's like, there's neither male nor female, nor Jew nor Gentile, nor slave or free, for we're all one in Christ. It just felt like two people coming together who embraced grace, embraced justice, embraced love in such a way that we were able to sit down and share our experiences, our weaknesses, our pains from the past. And it wasn't, it wasn't, to brag or the hierarchy of suffering or like, so I really earned my badge, I really earned my, it was two people sharing life. And I've always was impressed by that. And when I think about Lawrence, I automatically think pastor. I automatically think this man was born to be a pastor as a time at this. And nothing will ever be able to change that. And what I want to say is it's a unique thing to see within pastors' lives. There's certain people that you just go like, if they gave up the ministry tomorrow, something happened and they lost their ministry, if they were at the coffee shop, they would be the pastor. If they were the bartender, they would still be the pastor. If they're working on cars, they're going to be the pastor. Because for some people, it's just in them. And to me, that is Lawrence, to a T. When a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, give or take some months, I went through a really tough divorce. When I was living, I had running Revolution in Minneapolis. And I had a nervous breakdown, and I tried to take my own life, and ended up in the mental hospital, in the mental ward. And, you know, who was there? Lawrence. And I did not feel like I was getting a mercy visit from a pastor who was like, you really messed this one up, buddy. You know, like, oh, what's happened? You know, like, it was just, our callings were still there. And that's rare, because I grew up in a tradition that if you were divorced, your ministry was over, you know, much less if you're LGBTQ or anything like that, you know. And here we were in a moment of almost very, very humbling humility moment for me. And I did not feel judged. I felt loved. I felt grace. I felt mercy. I felt like, oh yeah, this is what we do. And here's a valley. Of course, Lawrence just shows up and walks into the valley and is like, hey man, what can I do for you? I'm here for you. And I think that's what we need in the church today. Another example I want to give, and I'm sure Lawrence wasn't like, hey, Lawrence didn't call me, so I would be like, hey, will you build me up? But sorry, I'm making this video, so I get to say what I want. Another really cool thing I remember seeing on social media, and I hope it's okay that I mentioned it was on social media, so there you go. Was a member of your church, a young man who was a member of your church that Pastor Lawrence took a picture with, and he had a Make America Great hat again. And I said, of course that's Lawrence. Of course that's what we're called to do. Because we know what it's like, a lot of us know what it's like to feel like the outsider, and trying to express who you are in your own uniqueness in different ways that often aren't socially acceptable within your own community. And Lawrence was saying, hey, here's my brother. We may not agree on this stuff, but he's here and he's doing his own thing. And I love him. I respect for him. He's a part of my community. You know, this has got to be the future of the church, because if we do not learn to disagree well, if we do not learn to argue well, you know, we lose. The church is gone. You know, the church right now, Revolution, my church calls itself a gathering, because I feel like the church is so caught up in this binary way of thinking of, we've got the right church and we've got the left church. We've got the conservatives and we've got the progressives. Now I know I'm talking to a fairly progressive church. But the struggle for the progressive churches sometimes is embracing the words of Paul and the messages of grace that you know, like, we've got to love, we can't other the other. We, you know, it seems like over the past few 10, 15, 20 years, legalism has kind of entered a little bit more into the progressive church. We've, you know, it used to be like, that's the church that takes everybody, and then there's the evangelicals that don't take anybody. But now the progressive church is a little bit like, you know, virtue signaling and legalism is snuck in. But I know without a doubt that that's just not Lawrence. And that's why I'm so grateful to be in Lawrence's life and to be a part of Lawrence's life, as we still see that these issues have to be fought for, and that these issues have to be faced. But we're able to see others not as the enemy, as more victims of misinformation, people who need to be loved and shown grace. And I think that's the beautiful thing about grace. I always say in Revolution, when I'm speaking, is that grace is the anarchy. Like, I'm not an anarchist, so don't let the tattoos and punk rock stuff behind me fool you. But grace is anarchy, because grace refuses to play within any system. So it says, I'm not going to play in the conservative system. I'm not going to play in the liberal system. I'm not going to play in the, you know, I'm not, grace doesn't have an asterisk. So grace is always seeking out inclusion, seeking out radical acceptance wherever it is. And that's a hard, hard road to toll. That is a hard road to walk. When you love your enemy, that's tough. But when you start loving others' enemies, that's when you get a target on your own back. And I can't help but say that I feel like this is what you guys are called to do. Because with a pastor like Lawrence, that's the only direction you can go, is by loving others and loving others well and disagreeing well, and not just having a diverse community of sexuality or race or things like that, but also having a diverse community of thought and thinking. And that's tough. But when you learn to argue well, you really become a body. You really become a community. And I'll tell you what, when you're a pastor in that situation, you need your congregation. So in some way, I'm charging the congregation today to say, support Lawrence. Support Lawrence and his partner. Support them. Build them up. Don't put them on a pedestal, but walk with them. Allow them to also be human. And maybe when they say things or we do things that you go, oh, why are you loving those people? Or why are you letting that person hear? Why are you doing, it's good to say, hey, let's sit down and have this conversation. And I just feel like, honestly, Salem Church, you guys have won the pastoral lottery at this point. And, if things fell apart again for me tomorrow, I know that I could count on Lawrence. Honestly, there was a time where I thought ministry was over for me. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember talking to Lawrence on the phone and just slightly hinting at maybe that I would need a job as a pastor or some sort of ministry job. And of course he was open to that, because restoration flows through Lawrence to the point where I don't even know how much Lawrence sees it, is that he just lives it. It's who he is. I brought my Bible here. I've got my Bible here and all that kind of stuff. But I think about Corinthians 13, 4-7 especially, has always been some of my favorite texts in the Bible. I'm very Paulinian. Not reactionary Paul. I don't really subscribe to reactionary Paul. I try to make people aware of that. But 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, where it says, love never gives up. It never loses faith. It's always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. I think it says it keeps no record of when it's been wrong. These are amazing things. It says, there's three things that remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. I mean, the idea that the Apostle Paul is saying love is greater than our own hope or even in our own faith, that love is the greatest of these things. And I would say you have someone who has a doctorate and a master's, a doctorate degree in love, in loving others, in caring for others, in seeking justice for others, and showing grace and mercy to those who seek to take away justice, to see those folks restored and given justice and being healed and being true followers of Christ. And this is a tough road to toil. God, it's tough. And there will always be the want to scapegoat. And the great thing is, with someone like Pastor Lawrence, is that he knows you just can't do it because he's been scapegoated. He's been they'd and them'd. He's got a stack of theys and thems in his life of what you could say, oh, well, they're that, he's that, they're that. But no, there's no room for that. When you've experienced scapegoating, when you've experienced it firsthand, and people say, well, if we could only get rid of them, everything would be better. When you've experienced that and gone through that, I went through that with my family. It was the Bakkers, where if we could just get rid of them and they were bad and they were evil, they're the cancer in the body of Christ. You know what I mean? When you've been them'd and they'd and scapegoated, you just start to realize, that's such a painful place to be. And we can't scapegoat the other. We can't make the other. We are called to love the other and show justice and speak truth, but truth out of love and truth out of grace and truth out of compassion. So I just want to say congratulations to everybody at Salem Church. Congratulations to Lawrence on being the new head pastor. Man, I'm proud of you. I'm there for you. If you ever need me, I'm glad to, jump on a plane and do what I need, or pick up the phone, or Zoom, or Instagram, or do whatever. And I definitely want to get you to speak for me a bit. I'm trying to be a little bit better at trying to get other people to speak, so I don't try to be like the Assemblies of God pastor that my dad was and never take a break. But anyhow, that's beside the point. I celebrate with you, celebrate with the community today. Love each other well, argue well, care about each other, keep showing grace, and live in love. Thank you so much, and peace.